You record. Okie dokie. 2 seconds. Let me just bring up all my screens and the chat and my Q&A tab. Okay. What else do we need here? I think we are good. David, thanks very much for joining me. Great to see you again.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Excited to be here. Always good to chat with the MakerPad team, especially you, Tom. I think this is the second time we've done something like this. I'm always happy.
Absolutely. Nice. How's things? Whereabouts are you calling in from?
I'm in Livingston, New Jersey. I moved out of the city at the beginning of the pandemic. I've been there for the last 8 years. I was sort of an early adopter of the whole thing, I guess, just being on Twitter my whole life. I'm in the right pockets, right communities on Twitter. So second I saw some of the people I was following talk about it, I knew it was time to get out.
Jump ship. Nice.
Yeah.
We kind of made that decision. Well, so we got lucky and we ended up being in a small village away from cities, which is, it's worked out quite well. Turns out small villages are fairly pandemic proof, which is nice.
Yeah.
So we just wait a couple more minutes, see other people filter in. But we can see, hey, Angelina, hey, Alonso, hey, Frank, hey, Tessa, how is everybody doing? Hopefully everyone could see and hear me clearly. I'm just making sure all my things are turned off so I don't get any buzzes throughout. Where's everybody from? I haven't actually asked everybody. Tessa, Frank, Angelina, Alonso, whereabouts in the world are you?
Oh, I see somebody from Toronto. Half my family's from Toronto. So nice to see somebody calling in from there.
Ah, nice. Frank, Rotterdam, Berlin. Hey, Jackson, good to see you. Awesome. Nice. So this is actually, you got a couple more people joining. Hey, Nick. This is the 7th session of the Community Creator Toolkit. And we touched on quite a varied range of topics. We've had some live builds about how to build some simple community apps, etc. How the theory behind community building from people at big businesses like Etsy and Airbnb and things like that, which has been awesome. So I think everyone's kind of getting a grip on what it takes to be able to build a community and how the theory behind building a community around a business. But now we're kind of looking at it from a different angle today, and that is building a community around a product. So we're seeing this almost take a little bit of an uptick because the barrier to entry for building products, we were just discussing this before we pressed the live button, the barrier to entry to building products has come way down. So now we all have the opportunity to build products, which is why no code is great. And now we have, on the flip side of that, the opportunity to build community. So happy today to be joined by David Spiro, who is the head of success at Bubble. I'm going to do a quick intro and David can expand on it. David, if I butcher it, then please tell me. David leads customer success and user community engagement at Bubble, managing Bubble's support team and helping users build no-code software on Bubble's platform. He has a background in startups and holds a BBA from the University of Michigan Roche School of Business. So long-time power user of Bubble, knows all the ins and outs, and has been there for a while. David, would you care to do an expanded introduction and then tell a bit of the story about how you're here today?
Yeah. The story of myself and the story of how I'm here today are just one and the same, completely intertwined. At the moment, I lead success at Bubble. One of the main functions that we provide is support to all of our users. So anytime somebody writes in a question, whether they're experimenting, onboarding, learning, stuck in their application or encountering a bug in what they're building, then that comes to my team. And we do our best to point them to the right resources or actually parachute into their app and help them resolve their bug, take a look at their workflows, take a look at their design and try to move the needle forward. Some other things we do, which I think we'll get to at the end of this discussion, are education with our new users. So proactively doing webinars and video courses. and then also doing sort of like higher order account management with folks that reach a certain level of scale. But that first bit that I mentioned, support, is like the core of what we do and has been the core of what Bubble has been doing since I think Bubble launched, which is tied into this whole conversation around product and community. Product and success were just one and the same the day Bubble launched, and have been one and the same since then. And I think it's actually how I got to Bubble, which is now going back to my story. I've been in startups my whole life. I mean, ever since I was a student at University of Michigan, I was just finding people to like build things with. For the first few sort of projects that I built, I wasn't the technical lead. I was the non-technical lead. And so I was always the one building the community and doing the sales and being with users, so on and so forth. And I found some success with that with a company that I launched called Elevator, which was a way for actually kind of same community, makers, people, entrepreneurs with ideas, to sort of organize their ideas into like business plans and share them with their friends for feedback. And so I had some success with that. And as I was scaling that operation down and I managed to sell that business, I sort of, the next phase of my career, I was like, you know what, I want to be the technical co-founder this time around. I don't want to just be the community builder. I like had confidence in that skill set. And so, you know, while I was sort of learning how to code, I stumbled upon Bubble in like 2016 on Product Hunt, actually. That's how I found Bubble, and was just blown away by what the product was and what it was enabling me to do as somebody who just like wanted to build the next thing that I was going to work on myself. And beyond the product blowing me away, the support blew me away. Like the attention to community, even at that time, just completely was astonishing. I remember like I'd have a question or I'd encounter an issue with what I was building. And even though the issue was like created by me, not a bug in like the Bubble platform, I'd get a response from this person, Emmanuel, like instantly. And I just was like, oh my God, this is crazy. Like, lo and behold, I find out that Emmanuel is the founder, which just blew me, or one of the founders, blew me away even more. And so with that, I just took it upon myself to reach out cold to Emmanuel one day, like after using Bubble for a few months, to thank him for building Bubble and to thank him for like all the dedication he had put into building community and providing support. And through that, we like just built a relationship. Over a few years, we like got coffee a few times, traded notes. And with that, when they were ready to build out a team, he gave me a call and he was like, hey, if you want to join on, you know, the business side of things, which for now just means doing support, we'd love to have you on the team. So that's sort of my elongated story, which is directly tied into Bubble and the importance of community at Bubble.
Yes, I love to hear that sort of thing, because that's almost like a similar story to how I was joining MakerPad. So I joined the community first, saw what they were doing, started doing my own things. I had like a few things that I'd done prior, like a few automations. Then when Ben posted that he was looking for somebody part-time to help out, like do like everything, like tutorials, bit of support, etc., I just like sent some stuff that I've done, and then I ended up joining the team. And also we're seeing it more and more in like the no code space. So people will like evangelize products, like just openly, just out of interest and curiosity. And then when the teams get to a point where they need to hire, they're like, oh, like this guy who's been really vocal about a product and being really helpful, helping others just openly for nothing in return on Twitter, why don't we just reach out and see if he wants a job? And lo and behold, like most of them get the first jobs because they know about the product, they're interested from day one, they've already been helping people, so like might as well get paid for it. So
yeah, you're when you're an early user of something, you're actually so aligned with the founders and their way of thinking, or the early employees, if there's early employees at that time. Like you're not the founder, and you're not the one maybe intuiting all the things, and you're not the one who has the skills that are for Bubble, like obviously Josh is in, and Emmanuel are in the 1% of 1% of engineers in the world. And so, but that doesn't mean you're not thinking in the same way. You just have a different skill set. So as an early user of something, being a part of the community is such a signal for, where you'll be able to thrive in terms of employment. And so for me, it was just like reaching out cold to Emmanuel and saying like, hey, thanks for doing this. Thanks for building this product. Thanks for putting so much time and effort into community. Like, would love to trade notes because I've had some success in these sorts of things. And yeah, that just spiraled from there. So yeah, shameless plug as we get started here, we're actually hiring for a number of roles on my team. And if anybody is in the no code space and is a Bubble user, like, you should definitely apply.
Nice. Perfect. Look at that. So the difference is what we've kind of seen from talks prior. Yeah. The difference between building a community, like around like a business, which does like various things, and then like building a community like around product, because that your community kind of evolves from support into your kind of product evangelist. So can you just like shed a bit of light on how that community has transformed since like the early days of Bubble, from you being like a user to now being an employee, and now the Bubble community having reached the scale that it is today?
Yeah, I think like, with Apple, like their whole shtick is in everything we do, we like think differently, right? And I think with Bubble, it's in everything we do it for the user. And so every decision that was made in the beginning days of Bubble back in 2012 and all the energy that was put into the product, there was equal amount of energy put into support for the user. And so it's you can look at so many examples of where founding teams were like, let's just build the product and then worry about support later, or let's build the product and worry about sales later, or worry about management of our users later. Bubble's story is just so the opposite. It was so intertwined. Josh was the lead engineer. Emmanuel was an engineer as well, but Emmanuel was doing all the support himself, and it was like instantaneous support for the user. And I think that is they knew who the user was, and they like recognized how, we're trying to make programming so accessible. And with that, we're getting people who don't know how to program, but who, can do it. They just have never done it before. And so there's just so much attention to that person, who that person is, and so much empathy for what that person is trying to solve, and so much investment in the problems that they're trying to solve. And so we've carried that mentality on from day one. It's this idea that like, we do have a big mission at play. We have a lot at stake. We have a lot at stake in our user success. And so being on the front lines with them and helping move the needle forward is just like, in everything and every decision that we do, it stands from product to user. And those support is just one tenet of that, like being that asynchronous line of communication directly with our user. The other thing that we put so much attention to at the beginning days was the forum, and like trying to make a digital place where our users can help each other out and build like their own sense of identity and their own sense of community. And I think today it's actually one of our, aside from the product, it is our biggest asset. I mean, it's like effectively its own version of Stack Overflow, where you can go and just get answers to any sort of question that you need to get answered to. And that was another thing that just stood out to me when I was an early user of Bubble, like beyond what I've said about how fast Emmanuel was to help me out. Like, if I had a question, I just went to the forum and I either posted it and got an answer, or somebody else had already posted it and had already answered it. And that was, 2016. That was probably only like a couple of years into Bubble being a live thing in the world. So, it's the combination of those two that drew me in, and I think draws a lot of people in and makes a lot of people successful with Bubble. Kind of goes back to, and Tom, you mentioned at the beginning, we were having like a bit of a side conversation before we started here. It's like, there's no cost to building product anymore if you're doing something digital, if you're doing software. So inevitably there's going to be a lot of people trying to do the same thing. And where there is cost is in building community, because that's real time, real energy, real effort. You're like creating this media digital presence for people to like feel aligned with. And I think Bubble got that right early on. And we continue to invest so much into that. And I think that's where like people who are doing no code products, the ones that are going to win over the next 10 years are the ones that are actually like having that Bubble mentality of like, it's not product then community, or product and community. It's like one and the same.
Yeah, that's interesting. There's one point that I want to touch on, because you mentioned like about the forum in the early days. We've like had a lot of sessions so far on tooling, and obviously being in the no code space, we love new tools and we love to like try all these new like fancy community building platforms. And obviously we at MakerPad use Circle, which is an incredible tool, and it just gives you like superpowers in terms of like doing things for your community and engaging and posting engaging content and posting programs like this. How has your tooling at Bubble evolved over time, and has it actually changed much, or was it just the actual engagement from the Bubble team that has solidified it?
Yeah, the tooling has changed, but as the tooling has changed, like the mentality has stayed consistent. This idea that like we just want to do everything for the user and we want to wow the user in everything that we do. So Emmanuel set that precedence, like being fast to respond in email and then being fast to respond on the forum if questions went unanswered by other community members. I mean, you can go into Bubble's forum today and still see like bits and pieces of when Emmanuel was answering questions back in like 2016. So we use Discourse for the forum. We've used it throughout this whole time. I'm sure Emmanuel is probably answering people through his personal email when the company started, and then he eventually moved into Help Scout, which is a great support tool. Actually spoke to the founder of Help Scout like 2 weeks ago. I'm just biggest fan of what they've built. It's like the perfect tool for delivering team-based support to a community. And we've recently switched over to Front for our asynchronous communication with users. We love Front as well. They do things a bit differently depending on like what you need or what you're looking for. Help Scout might be the better tool. Front might be the better tool.
Got it.
Yeah.
I'm just going to post a link in the chat for everybody. Is it fronttap.com and helpscout.com? Yeah. I think obviously just for everyone to take a look at that. And what's the like reason and function and reason for using a tool like this, and like what was the functionality that was missing from a prior solution which made you use this?
Yeah, I think the reason to use one of those tools is to you might think that the only reason to use one of those tools is if you're sharing the workload when delivering support and success to your users, meaning like you should only use one of those tools if you have like 2 people minimum. But what I learned from Emmanuel was just like by himself as a sole person delivering support in the early days, moving that workload into Help Scout like gave that workload credence and like put more just mental energy behind that, and made him like just double down on the dedication there. So I don't think that there's ever a wrong time to start using a dedicated support tool, because it sort of like creates that separation of church and state, if you will, from like what you're doing in your personal Gmail versus what you're doing to actually like build a community. And I know a lot of community building right now is done in Twitter, obviously. And so like you use DMs and you use just the inherent protocol that is Twitter to like build your community. But if you are doing things via email, then getting involved in one of these support tools is a good start. Help Scout is like so good at what it does. It's so good for, focusing on email support and then getting other people involved in doing that. Front is like they don't have like one specific use case. Like they're not really for success. They're not really for sales. They're not really for, any one thing. But the way the tool is designed, it's kind of like a hybrid of Slack and a support tool. So it enables you to move like really fast. You can like drag conversations around to assign them to people. It was more of like a UX factor for us than, an outcome-based thing. And through just a bit of a different UX, I think we're able to move a bit faster and wow our users a bit more just by using that.
Got it. What was was there any like standout decisions or changes of direction at the early stages of building the Bubble community that really made a difference to those like core first group of users? It could be like 100,000, 10,000 relative to Bubble. Was there any standout ones for you?
I don't know if there are any like precise moments. I think it's more just this mentality that we continue to reiterate. Like whenever we find the opportunity to reiterate, just being fast and like always trying to create a resolution for the user, so that we move the needle for them. Bubble is an extreme example of that because Bubble is a programming language and because people are using it to build custom software, and because we host and run the apps, like the combination of those two things means that users are creating their own bugs in their own logic, which you can't do in Squarespace. You can't do in Wix. You can't create a bug in what you're building. You might encounter a bug in what Squarespace has built, but you can't create a bug in what you've built. So that's what makes Bubble different. Like people are building custom things, so they can create holes in their logic. They can create bugs in what they're doing, and so we resolve those things for the users. So we have like, that was probably the biggest decision, is that we would get involved in that workflow. We would be that invested in the user's success. And I think, that's something that I'll forever carry into any like future thing that I do in my career. If I stay at Bubble, then I'll continue to reiterate that with Bubble. But, and if I share advice with anybody, it's just like be as fast as possible and wow your users as much as possible, because especially if you're doing something that is, consumer facing or community facing or user facing, like there's just no cost to you if you're the person doing the work other than time to like just be fast and create that wow factor.
It's true. Yeah, it's very true. One question to lead on from that: how much have you weighed community feedback and feature recommendations? Obviously, this is going to vary from whatever anybody is building. Like it could be like an app or it could be a business. How heavy have you weighed community feedback and feature requests versus requests and the roadmap from internally?
Yeah. A lot of Bubble is a balance of these two things. It's like the intuition of, the company and the feedback from the users. And I think as we've grown, we've done a pretty good job of balancing the both. We're not too on one direction, one side of the equation or not. We've throughout the course of time experimented with different ways to involve the community. I mean, in the early days, we experimented with like doing surveys directly on the forum with users where they would like sort of vote on what we should build. We experimented with like this notion of sponsored feature requests, where like if you just really needed something so badly, you could just pay us and we would build it for you. And today we've matured as a company. We're a bit bigger now and we have more tooling internally. And so now what we do is like anytime there's a feature request, we log it, we associate it together with other users, and we kind of like track it at some weighted score to figure out like, should it be built, should it not be built, what will be the impact on the user community. And so, with that, we've sort of put our money where our mouth is. And now I think it's like once a quarter we do these Pebble days where the whole engineering team stops what they're working on in order to work on like these features that the users are requesting. And like the whole engineering team will spend the day and just try to crank out as much product as possible for the users. So I think at the last Pebble Day, we did something like 25 or so new features that are just like these like quality of life, like things that, you know, some people have asked for, a lot of people have asked for, maybe one person asked for it and we were like, oh shit, that's a really good idea. Like we should build that.
Yeah,
so
thanks
yeah,
very much.
yeah, like we're not like prideful and like, oh, it's, you know, we're behind Bubble and like everything needs to come from us. Like, no, we're just, you know, again, it's like product and success go hand in hand. And so, you know, the user's feedback is as important as you know, our intuition is.
And how do you identify and what do you do with the power users and super users that emerge from your community? Obviously, you were one of them and you ended up getting a job, but I'm sure there are countless in the community. How do you handle those?
Yeah, so that's sort of the next evolution of Bubble as we mature as a company. Like we're spinning up this sort of account management function within the success team. Everything until this point, like we've sort of delivered the same level of support to everybody. We obviously, you know, will prioritize issues or requests if they're like business critical emergencies or if they're coming from like our biggest customers. But now as we mature as a company, we're trying to scale up that part of the organization where we can get better at identifying those people and get better at delivering like service to those people. So we're looking into, you know, prior cases as examples of this. And before I get into what we're thinking about going forward, like just to mention what we've done in the past, you know, we look at just the amount of conversations that people are having with us. Like that's a pretty good indicator. Like we can obviously track that in Help Scouting Front. We can see how many people have posted certain things in the forum. We can see how many conversations they've had with us via email. We can see, you know, what their, you know, traction is looking like just based on how much they're paying us, since how much they're paying us is a pretty good proxy for their success in the world. And, you know, that's another thing I guess a good point to mention is like, our success is so tied to the success of the people building on us at like a core business model level. Folks are paying us only as they scale. So it's just in our interest to help people scale. Looking forwards though, and I think you and I, Tom, had mentioned that, chatted about this last week when we were getting in sync, like the Twilio case study is such an interesting case study of like maybe what not to do or how you can just like maybe sort of hedge against future problems. But
yeah, should we shed some light on what that actually is and what happened there?
Yeah. So yeah, Twilio, like, you know, I'm sure everybody knows what that is, but you know, they're a pay per use business model, which is like so insane that you know, you can create a business model where like people only pay you when they need it. That's like the holy grail, I think, for any company out there. As an API platform, like they, Stripe, can do that. And Bubble is somewhat of that, which is why we looked at Twilio as a case here. But basically, like Twilio was only engineers at, you know, the entire company. Like they had no sales staff, account management staff. They had some support staff, and they just really only focused on product. And it was because their, you know, their users and their customers were also engineers who were just like using the Twilio API to get things done. And so that forcing function, like they never got out of their own way and they never built a sales staff. They were like, we don't need a sales staff. That's added extra weight that we don't need to manage. Our customers, engineers, they don't want to talk to people. They just want a product that works. One of their biggest customers was Uber, and Uber was using Twilio for like anytime they would send a text message, like anytime you were notified as an end user, like your ride is here, or like you should rate this person, or, you know, for anything logging into the app, anything security related. And the contract got so big, like I think it was $60 million they were paying Twilio a year for that pay per use model, which is like insane to think about. And it represented like, I think 15% of Twilio's business at one point in time as Twilio got public. And as Uber got public, like Uber, the makeup of their company changed, and they started to put like account managers on top of the engineers to like kind of look at the amount of money that they were paying Twilio and other API platforms, and starting to do their own cost benefit analysis of like, okay, what if we just built this in house? I mean, we're Uber, we're big enough, we could certainly build this in house if we want to. And it was at that point that Twilio woke up to this idea like, oh shit, we've sort of missed the opportunity to have like a team on our side to manage the relationship and to like develop that context of what Uber is thinking about and the decisions they're making and the pain points they're feeling and so on and so forth. And so they had to scramble on their end as a public company to spin up an account management function. I mean, it's obviously worked out well for them. They've figured that out, and they've grown quite a bit since they've been public. But it's very analogous to, I think, like this notion of like, it's not product then success, like they should happen at the same time. And it's something that we're starting to do now, like to spin up this like sort of account management function where we're looking at our bigger customers, we're seeing that they're scaling on Bubble, and we're seeing that like we could do a better job of understanding who they are as entrepreneurs, the problems that they're solving, the context of their use case, where they see the Bubble platform fitting in with where they're going, so that, you know, selfishly, like we can get ahead of what Twilio had to scramble to fix, but also so that we can just make the product better for them and for other customers like them.
Got it. So yeah, I think an early focus on customer success is clearly a winner, and don't just focus on product the whole time and ignore the community. That's probably a key lesson to learn there. Lucky I got away with it. What are some like tactics and tips you've used over more recent years to bring more people into the Bubble ecosystem?
Yeah, so we talked about email support. We talked about the forum. The next frontier for Bubble is like Twitter and being more of like having more of a media presence. You know, the last 10 years, you could look and see so much investment into like D2C brands that were doing direct consumer, like physical products. I think the next iteration of that is like direct consumer, like media brands, where like companies like Bubble, like MakerPad, like Product Hunt, like AngelList are like, they're media companies in a way. Like they're so good at, you know, doing these things that are productizing their approach to media, productizing their approach to social. And that's sort of the next frontier of Bubble. It's thinking about like, who are we on Twitter? Who are we on Instagram? Who are we on Facebook? Where do we fit? And I guess we should throw Zoom into that mix, because Zoom is obviously such a big player in building community digitally these days. So that's sort of the next frontier of where what we're trying to figure out.
And how early do you think companies should do that, seeing that that's like a successful route to market? And I'm only saying that because like us at MakerPad, we don't really think that we do any marketing as in like the traditional like marketing terms, like whatever that may be. But what we do is like produce a lot of content. We do a lot of things like workshops. We obviously build like tutorials, and that obviously lives on the site, and we have certain things available to certain people. How much focus should you spend on that in the early days? Because I presume early days of Bubble was all focused on products, which then grew the community through supporting each other, and then power users supporting other newer users. And now you're kind of moving into the content game. If you were to start maybe like your own project, like whatever it was, it could be like a side project or whatever, how early would you focus on content? This is kind of getting away from like the community topic a bit, but I think that content side also really helps like feed back into growing the community.
Yeah, I think Bubble is kind of a legacy business in that case, because it was founded in 2012. It was like before this notion of like, you need to be a media player. You want to be, you don't want to have a distinction between marketing and just like what you do every day because that's who you are and that's the ethos of your company. If Bubble was founded today, I think it would look, the way it would have been created would be totally different. It'd be more along the lines of what you just described, since MakerPad is like relatively newer, and it makes sense that you just characterize yourself in that way. So for any side project that I would work on, or for, you know, if I'm talking to new entrepreneurs, if I'm thinking about the audience here, like I wouldn't make a distinction. I wouldn't make a distinction between like product, success, and community. They're all one and the same today. It's just, you really, it's especially true if you're building something for yourself where you yourself represent other users that you're going to attract. Like, then there is no distinction between you and the product and the community and Twitter and Facebook and Zoom. Like, it's all one effort together. And
that's interesting.
The tools have changed, which just make it easier for us to be ourselves and for us to, you know, attract more people like us, especially if you're building something for yourself. So I wouldn't make a distinction. I think the people that are going to be the most successful going forward are the ones where there is no distinction. The founders, the people, I'm sure we're all following the same minds on Twitter right now, but like, you know, the brands that we probably believe in the most are the ones where like the founder has a pretty big following on Twitter, pretty like realistic presence of themselves on Twitter, where it isn't like a distinction between like, okay, well, this is them and this is the product. It's just all one and the same.
Yeah, and that's actually quite, especially if you're like just starting something, this is probably ties in actually quite nicely to like the build in public movement as well, where people are actually just like building, like very clear from the get-go that this is something new I'm working on. Like, this isn't going to be great like to start with, but you're going to iterate it. It's going to get better over time. If you want to come along from the ride, provide feedback and help shape the product, then great. With actually seeing a lot of projects go that way as well. What would be kind of the first steps you take? So we're obviously in the early stages of people's products, businesses, and early community stages. You may not even have any users yet. What sort of things would you start putting out there to kind of encourage people to come into your like ecosystem, so to speak?
Yeah. I mean, if it's a user-facing thing, then and you're a representative of that user base, or you're like a close representative of that user base, then I think you sort of have to like bet on that product success tie-in and just like wowing the user with success, so that like you create sort of compounding effects of like their experience, and just think as small as possible in terms of the support that you're delivering and the success that you're delivering. Going from 0 to 1 and 0 to 10, and just making like very real connections with people to get there, whether those real connections are like real life people that you know, or using Twitter and your audience on Twitter to connect with people that you know, or people that you think are representative of your audience. Like, you really don't need to think beyond like one at a time when you're just starting out, because, you know, if you get to 100 disparate, unconnected, successful experiences, like that will have snowball effects. I mean, I remember when I launched Elevator was the last sort of thing that I did on my own. And the product was okay. The community was really strong. And I remember one of the early community members was the founding team behind Product Hunt. Like, I remember they like retweeted Elevator a couple times and was like, hey, like, what do we all think about this? And they were but their approach to community was so much different than my approach. And like, I had always looked upon them as like, just, going, one at a time. I think even for Product Hunt, they didn't even start with a product. They started over email. And they were just so focused on developing like those real connections with users, like one after another. That would be my sort of advice going forward, especially given that, Twitter is just full of early adopters. Whatever amount of community you're entering, like that early adopter community is on Twitter and is like ready to experience new things and try new things out.
Like it. So let's say you have now like found a bit of a following on Twitter. You're all kind of talking about the same stuff and you're liking and retweeting each other. Clearly you've got like a shared interest and you have like a product which you've built, which you want to bring these people into. Where do you put these people to actually like have the conversation? Is it Discourse? And we've got a question from Frank actually, which touched on that. He said, would you still pick Discourse as a place for the community to get value / benefit from each other's knowledge? What do you see as the pros and cons of this forum-based approach? It feels less human due to the static nature than more chat-orientated platforms.
Yeah. Again, Discourse might be like a legacy thing for Bubble just because of when we started and like what the internet looked like back then. So Discourse works for us because it's important that questions are searchable. It's important that like threads are searchable because people often have the same question as they experience Bubble. And so like enabling users to go back and find those questions and find those answers is really important to us. But for other communities, like that searchability might not be relevant, like real-time connection might be more relevant. In that case, Discord or Slack or even like just live Zoom related things might be better, might be the better approach. I'm sure that Zoom is going to evolve over the next few years as like the real-time version of what like Slack has looked like. We all think Slack is a real-time way to build community, but like wait until there's a company out there that figures out like, why don't we just get people at a defined time into a Zoom together to connect? So it really depends on like what the use case is, I would say.
So we've talked also a lot through the sessions so far about having like a unifying mission and keeping like users engaged. How do you at Bubble ensure that your mission comes across throughout the entire community, even to the size that it is? And just quickly on that, remind everyone how many users are in the Bubble community at the moment.
I think we're close to 700,000 right now, which is pretty cool.
Okay, so that's quite a lot.
Yeah.
How do you ensure your mission kind of cuts through so kind of everyone is like aligned with what you're trying to do? And then how do you keep people like coming back and keep them engaged and everything?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, given that we've matured as a company, like a lot of that effort is happening internally now, like just engaging with one another on the team. We all meet as a group Monday as an entire team, and then with our respective teams. And a lot of those meetings are just like reiterating the importance of what we're doing and why we're doing it. And then we also meet at the back end of the week on Friday everybody gets like a 5-second window to share what they've done in the week prior. And it all inevitably ties back to like why we're all in this job doing what we're doing. And so, we try to carry that through when we're engaging with the users. So the engagement with the users today is through my team in the real-time support. It's also through my team in the education that we're putting out there. So we're doing video courses with users. These are more like static things that we create once and then share for people to pick up as they go. This week, we're actually doing our first live webinar. We're doing office hours on Thursday for anybody who wants to join. Another shameless plug there, which we're going to do every Thursday going forward. Nice. And then every Tuesday going forward, we're doing an intro to Bubble webinar that anybody can join. So this is, literally anybody who's new to the community can hop on a Zoom and hang out with somebody from my team. And then, the newest team at Bubble is actually the growth team, and the growth team's main responsibility is to spread that message, is to create like a bigger top of the line funnel to bring more people into Bubble. And so we're doing that in a variety of ways, and it's all aligned with who we are as a company. So we have somebody on the team who is building up our like boot camp presence, where we're actually trying to teach people how to program on Bubble. We have somebody on the team who's looking to create more like relationships with accelerators and universities. And then we have somebody on the team, Vivian, who, Tom, you had a chance to meet, obviously, who's
Yep.
building our social presence, which today is largely Twitter based.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, we had obviously a couple of workshops with Jeremy as well, how to build like apps from scratch. So he's obviously coming from Webflow, and he's
Yeah.
going to be making some amazing content for you. And obviously there's going to be like some updates and stuff coming with Bubble. So we're really excited for that to actually just get some more content out there. And yeah, the live webinars I'm really looking forward to as well.
Yeah.
What are some things you wish you could do with your current community that you aren't currently doing?
So, I definitely miss like the in-person sort of gatherings that we were starting to do before the pandemic. We were planning to invest a lot in that. We just it harkens back to the things I was saying, like about this one-on-one approach, and in order to get scale, you just compound your one-on-one relationships. You don't get scale by like thinking about, okay, I need to get to 10,000 people right now. You get to your compounding effects get you to that scale over time. So we were planning to invest a lot in meetups, just in New York, and hoping to scale that out city by city thereafter. Obviously the pandemic changed that, but for better or worse, it might actually enable us to connect with more people in a way, because we can do things like this. And that's why we are investing in the webinars, which we're starting tomorrow. So if you were to have asked me that last week or 2 weeks ago, before we sort of conceptualized the webinar idea, I would have said we're missing out on this and we don't really have a good idea of what to do next. But now I think we like at least have an experiment that we're about to run to try to build that back into our sort of thinking around community.
Got it. So I think let's talk about some like early stage things. So of all the things we've kind of touched on today, again, if you were to kind of start something new, what would be like the process that you'd follow? Say, and we would start from the point of you actually have your first version of the product ready, and you are about to share it with the world. Say you're building like a personal project, which you have done in the past, but in today's climate, what are the steps that you'd take?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I would do the like one at a time approach. I'd build it for myself and make sure that like it was solving the problem for myself. And then I'd find a friend who I think shares the problem, and I'd get them to use it and make sure it solved the problem for them. And I'd do that over and over and over. And I'd be confident in, this crazy thing in the universe called compounding, where like, if you just think about things like at the most basic level, like they will have compounding effects over time. It's, I think, why Elevator didn't become like the big idea that I knew it could have become, because I took the wrong approach. I was so focused on getting like mass eyeballs onto Elevator, and I didn't spend my time creating one-on-one connections with people. And instead I spent my time like actually networking to meet the right people who managed Apple's App Store team, which I was able to do. And Apple ended up featuring Elevator on the App Store during their Worldwide Developers Conference in 2013, and they featured it all over the App Store in a number of different locations. And so Elevator at one point got to like 150,000 users, but it kind of just fell flat at some point because I didn't do a good job of connecting with those people one at a time and making sure that Elevator was solving problems one at a time. That's what I've learned along the way, both from doing other side projects, from working at Bubble, and through working with the users who are building things on Bubble, the importance of just like solving problems for people one at a time. Because if you can actually solve one person's problem, there's inevitably more people in the world who will have that problem, because we all are sharing enough of the same experiences, whether that problem is experienced by 1 billion people or 1,000 people is really up to you and your idea to figure out, like, do you care about solving 1 billion people's problems? Do you care about solving 1,000 people's problems? But the way to 1 billion users, the way to 1,000 users is the same. You just have to go one at a time. Another example that always comes to mind for me is Snapchat. Like, they're, as of like last night, a $50 billion company, which is obviously absurd. But their founding story was like, they just went like high school class to high school class in LA, like literally classroom by classroom, to sign people up and make sure that like ephemeral messaging was solving a problem for them. And lo and behold, now how many hundreds of millions of people do they have later? Just because, it turns out that like ephemeral messaging is the way that language works when we speak to each other. And so like a lot of people had the problem of wanting their text messages to be ephemeral. So so I think just going one at a time is the only way to build things.
Gotcha. So probably a good comparison to draw from that like elevator example that you give is the product hunt way that people launch the companies. So people come up with like the first version of the product, gets onto product hunt. Hopefully it does really well, gets over traffic, gets over signups. And then after that day, like the traffic drops. Like you may have grabbed like however many users, but then taking your example, you'd say if you fail to connect with those set of users on a one-to-one basis and make them stick, then you kind of left in a bit of a rut. Would that be fair?
Exactly. And Bubble is a case in point here. Like the origin story of Bubble is that Josh was the technical co-founder of somebody else's idea. And they were building this technology. Josh was building the technology. The other guy was, selling the product. They had a few customers. They were doing well as a business, but it wasn't enough revenue to justify 2 full-time salaries. And so Josh was like really down on the fact that this successful venture might have to close. And so he said, well, what if this guy, non-technical person, could build the product too? Then you could have the product and sales being done by the same person, and there would be enough revenue to support that. So Josh then, stopped working on that venture and started building Bubble for this person. And like one by one was signing up people like this person to use Bubble. And he loves to joke about how like at the time, all you could do on Bubble was like put a button and an input on a page. But like that was enough. It like did enough of a job because that was enough to create a form, which is what this person needed. They were actually processing payment by check at the time. They didn't bother to integrate with any payment processing. And so like doing as little as possible to solve like one person's problem is just like really all that it takes at the beginning phases. I think it's easy to misconstrue what Product Hunt can be and what like launching on Product Hunt can be. Like, of course, when you launch on Product Hunt, you want something that like is a bit more fully featured and a bit more polished. But I don't know that I would use Product Hunt as like the place where I launch. I might use Product Hunt after I like got 10 problems solved, or like I solved 25 people's problems, and then I went to Product Hunt to get like just in front of more people like that, knowing that I know how to solve their problems and convert them into sticky users.
Like it. I think that is probably a good place to wrap. I think we've buzzed through an hour. We've talked about some really key points, and actually getting something moving from the ground up, like the one-to-one thing, I think is a golden piece of advice, and often something which you can ignore, especially as like the user bases grow and the questions keep like flooding in all day, every day, and you've got like stuff to answer in the morning. So yeah, great advice there. If there are any final questions, then you can find them in the chat. We've got a couple of minutes, and if not, what we can do, we can ask them on the session thread within Circle, so we can get back to and make sure David gets added into there as well, so you can see them. But yeah, David, that was great. Thanks very much for for taking the time and answering the questions. It's like a really unique insight of like building a community around a product, especially because Bubble has 700,000 people like engaging around one product. So if you get to that stage, I think you're doing all right. So if it's working for Bubble in terms of customer success and community management, then chances are it will be good for smaller communities also.
Yeah, Tom, thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure to come on and chat with you guys. Just want to mention again, we are doing our first live office hours this Thursday. So if people want to sign up and join, just I think Tom put it onto the chat here.
Yep.
You can go to our forum and see the pin post. We'd love to have you. We'd love to have your feedback since it is just our first time doing this in sort of a Zoom setting. And then, yeah, I'd also want to just say that I'm hiring for my team. It's a great position. It's the job that I started out doing. It's a success associate role, so you get to work directly with the founders who are building things on Bubble. You get to answer their questions. You get to go into their apps and help them out. If you're looking to like learn how the web works, get better at building things for the web, but like continue to be user facing, it's a great job to have. And we'd love to have people who are already in this community, as we had talked about when we started this chat.
Do you need to have any experience in Bubble to be able to apply, or is that like a preferable?
No experience in Bubble is required. It's more just like that mindset. Do you want to help people out, and do you want to learn how the web works?
Brilliant. Love it. David, thanks very much again. We'll get this session posted up ASAP for those who couldn't attend live, and also be posting a summary along with it also. And in 1 hour's time, we have our second session of the day with David Spinks talking about building community with massive impact. And David is VP of Community at Bevy. So we've got another session. You've got a break for an hour, and then we can jump in there and see what Bevy are doing. David, thanks very much again. Really appreciate you taking the time. I'm sure everybody else does as well. And we will see you soon.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks for everybody who joined.
Thanks, everyone. Speak to you later.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye.